Hi, it's Walter, and I'm recording this message for Sunday, May the 10th, 2020, which means it's the 9th Sunday in a row we haven't been able to meet together because of the coronavirus restrictions. It's also Mother's Day. And I want to say happy Mother's Day to all the moms who are watching this. Especially want to wish my mom a happy Mother's Day. Also want to wish the mom of my children, Kathy, a happy Mother's Day. Also want to wish Kathy's mom, my mother-in-law, Laura, a happy Mother's Day. And last and certainly not least, I want to wish the mom of my grandchildren, Alyssa, a happy Mother's Day. And I know that because of social distancing, this day probably isn't going to be all that we want it to be, but I do hope it's the best it can be for you and for your loved ones. Well, for some reason, I've been thinking about masks a lot lately. Masks are everywhere. And I don't know if you've been wearing a mask while you've been out in public, but I have been wearing a mask, and I have to tell you, it feels really awkward to me. It makes me feel strange. In fact, I feel somehow conspicuous, like I stick out, even though most of the people around me are also wearing their masks. I don't like this new normal. I don't like this new mask-wearing reality at all, which is kind of a strange thing for me to say, because the reality is wearing masks is nothing new to me. In fact, I've been wearing a variety of masks for most of my life. No, I'm not a superhero like Spider-Man. I'm not an outlaw fighter like the Lone Ranger. I'm not a bandit who holds up banks on my days off. No, over the years, I've been wearing masks that aren't as obvious as those masks. But for people who looked closely and for people who really paid attention to me, my masks were there all the same. I want to tell you a story about my mask wearing. It's a story I think many of you will be able to relate to. Years ago, when I was in graduate school at UNM, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and that conversation was a turning point in my life. Out of the blue, my friend turned to me and she said, "Walter, you are the most enigmatic person I know. The most enigmatic person I know." Now, my first reaction was to take that statement as a compliment. After all, a synonym for enigmatic is mysterious, and what young man doesn't want to be thought of as being mysterious? Walter Lane, international man of mystery, that has a certain ring to it. But I didn't leave the conversation there. No, I asked the obvious follow-up question. I asked my friend, "What do you really mean by that?" And her answer hit me right in the heart. She said, "Well, there's a school you, and then there's a family and church you. And those two identities don't seem to match up at all." Ouch. That really hurt. It hurt because it was the truth. And it hurt because she had hit on a second, and for me, a more accurate synonym for enigmatic. She had hit on the word contradictory. And Walter Lane, international man of contradiction, doesn't have quite the same ring to it. My friend was saying, "You are a mask wearer. You have a graduate school mask, and you have a family and church mask. And because you switch back and forth between those two masks, it makes it really hard to figure out who you truly are, what your true nature really is." And that conversation with my atheist graduate school friend sent me into an existential crisis. And that crisis was followed by a period of deep introspection. See, I was wrestling with a crucial question that we all have to answer, the question of, who am I? Am I the cynical intellectual I portray myself to be in our graduate seminars? Or maybe I'm that worldly, sarcastic comic I depict myself to be when I'm hanging around the lab. Or perhaps I'm the faithful husband and father and Christian I present myself to be when I'm around my family and around my church friends. Who am I? I really struggled with that question. You see, one of the problems with being a mask wearer is that all of those disguises that you put on that make it hard for other people to figure out who you are also make it difficult for you to figure out for yourself who you are. So I was asking, who am I? Who is that masked man? And as I wrestled with that question, the answer became obvious. Who am I? I'm a mask wearer. That was my identity, a mask wearer. Someone who sought approval in every situation from everyone by putting on whatever mask I thought they would like to see. That's who I was. But is that who I wanted to be? And the answer to that question was an emphatic no. You see, the Bible has another synonym for enigmatic. In the Bible, mysterious, contradictory mask wearers are identified by Jesus as hypocrites. Jesus called me what I was, a hypocrite. An international man of hypocrisy is not a label to be proud of. So what's a hypocrite? What's a mask wearer to do? Well, my first instinct was to choose one of my masks and just try to stick with that mask. In my case, I decided to choose the faithful husband and father and Christian mask and wear that mask around as much as I could. And it turned out there were a couple of big problems with that strategy. The first problem is that when you know that you're wearing a mask, you also know that you can take that mask off. You can take it off whenever it becomes uncomfortable. So that's what I did. I slipped my faithful religious mask on and off according to my comfort level in different situations. But that problem is dwarfed by the second problem. The second problem with trying to just choose that religious mask is that it turns out Jesus really hates it when people wear religious masks. That's a problem he had with the Pharisees, right? In fact, if you want to get a glimpse of Jesus when he's really worked up, when he's really angry, just turn to the 23rd chapter of Matthew. Turn to the 23rd chapter of Matthew and listen to Jesus berate the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Jesus upbraids them like this. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites." 7 different times, some version of woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. And what do you think it is that has Jesus so worked up? Well, it's that they were a bunch of mask wearers. Sure, their mask was a religious mask, but it was a mask all the same. It was a mask that disguised their true identity. It disguised their true character. Their mask obscured their greed and their selfishness and their lack of compassion. But those masks couldn't hide their true identity from Jesus. Like me, they were international men of hypocrisy. You see, it turns out that choosing just one mask, just choosing a religious mask, doesn't keep you from being a hypocrite. It just makes you a more consistent hypocrite. So what's a hypocrite to do? If choosing one mask isn't the answer, then what is? And it turns out that the answer to finding my true identity wasn't in finding the right mask to wear. No, instead, the answer was to accept the identity that had already been given to me. Accept and embrace the identity that had already been given to me by the God of the universe. And that's the quest I've been on since I had that enigmatic conversation with my friend. And I want you to know it's been a struggle. I want you to know it's still a struggle. That struggle to throw away my mask and accept and embrace my true identity in Christ. But I have no doubt that God has called me on this journey, and I have no doubt that he's calling you on that journey as well. He's calling us on this journey to embrace our true identity, to embrace who he has made us to be. And it's a journey that's best taken together. So where are we going? Well, we're going to move away from masks, and we're going to move toward clothing. It's a journey away from masks and toward clothing. So what's the difference between being masked and being clothed? Well, biblically, masks are used to hide and disguise the truth. That's what the Pharisees did. That's what I was doing. But in contrast, clothing reveals the truth. So when the psalmist in Psalm 104 says, "O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty." The psalmist isn't suggesting that God went to his closet one morning and decided to put on splendor and majesty. God didn't wake up one day and said, "I think I want to appear splendiferous and majestic today." No, God is splendid. God is majestic. That's his essence. That's his being. It's not a costume that God wears. No, it's his clothing. It reveals who he is. And that's who God is. Then who are we? Well, if we throw away our mask and accept the identity that Jesus died to give us, we need to know how we're clothed. We need to know what essence we have. We need to know what beings we are. We need to know about our character. We need to know who we are. And who we are is we are God's image bearers. We read in Genesis that we were created in the image of God. Paul tells us in Ephesians chapter 4 that we were created to be like God. And John tells us in the first chapter of his gospel that those of us who have received and believed Jesus have been given the right to be children of God. And since we bear God's image and since we've been made to be his children, there should be a family resemblance. We should look like our Father, and we should look like our brother Jesus. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 that Jesus has made it possible for us to live with unveiled faces, with unmasked faces. And because our faces are unmasked, they reflect the glory of God. And because of Jesus, we're able to be transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory. Paul also reminds us in Galatians chapter 3 that when we were baptized, we were clothed with Christ, with his character, with his essence. And then in Colossians chapter 3, Paul tells us that we shouldn't lie to each other. He's telling us that we shouldn't put up masks when we interact with each other. We shouldn't lie to each other because we have been clothed with a new self, and that new self is being renewed in the image of its creator. And that's the journey that we're on. It's the journey that we're on together. It's a journey to accept and embrace the identity that we've been given freely by God. It's been given to us freely, but it came at great cost to God. It's a journey away from wearing masks and a journey toward being clothed with Christ. It's a journey away from wearing masks and toward reflecting God's glory as he transforms and renews us into the image of Christ. Because that's who we are, and he is who we wear. So in the days ahead, let all of the masks that you see all around you, let those masks be a reminder that you are not a mask wearer. No, you are a child of God, clothed with Christ. And when you come to that realization, then you'll be able to let his glory shine for all to see. So, brothers and sisters, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and give you his peace as you let your light shine. Amen.